In a quiet residential neighborhood in Seattle where the autumn wind brushed gently against her cheeks, Rachel Harrison was still struggling to adapt to her new married life, a life far more complicated than she had ever imagined, especially with the presence of 5-year-old Emma, her stepdaughter. Rachel had worked for years as a medical clerk at the local general hospital, living a stable routine despite the fact that love had never blessed her the way she once hoped. After a painful diagnosis from her doctor telling her it would be difficult for her to have children, Rachel had quietly abandoned her dreams of marriage and motherhood. Everything changed last spring when she met Michael Harrison, a pharmaceutical sales manager whose calm demeanor and warm smile captured her heart during a business meeting. When she learned that Michael had recently lost his wife to illness and was raising his young daughter alone, Rachel naturally wanted to support him, seeing a fragile family she longed to help heal. Their courtship was brief, and when Michael gently told her, "Emma needs a mother," Rachel felt something inside her awaken. Even if she couldn't have children of her own, perhaps she could become one in a different way. The wedding was small, held in a modest church with only family present, and Emma looked angelic in her little white dress as she walked down the aisle carrying a bouquet. But 3 months later, with 2 months of living together, Rachel found herself unable to hide her confusion. Emma, with beautiful blonde hair and large blue eyes, was an adorable child, but she always seemed distant. "Good morning, Emma," Rachel said brightly at the breakfast table, but the girl only murmured a tiny "good morning" without meeting her eyes. She didn't touch the pancakes Rachel made for her, only sipping a bit of orange juice. "Emma, eat a little more," Michael said from behind his newspaper, but his tone carried a harshness that made Emma shrink. "It's okay, Emma, you don't have to force yourself," Rachel added gently, but Emma only shook her head and slipped away from the table. "I'm sorry, Rachel," Michael sighed. "She still hasn't gotten used to everything. She was used to my previous wife's cooking, so new flavors might confuse her." Rachel understood he didn't like discussing his late wife. He never gave details beyond saying she died suddenly from illness, and Rachel never wanted to reopen painful memories. Still, she wondered if her cooking truly didn't suit Emma's taste. She bought cookbooks, researched child-friendly recipes, experimented every day, yet Emma's reactions grew colder. "Time will solve it," Michael reassured her as he left for work, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're kind. She'll accept you eventually." But Rachel's uneasiness deepened every time she noticed the child's trembling hands, the fearful shadow in her eyes. When Rachel picked her up from daycare, Emma smiled while playing with other children. But the moment she spotted Rachel, her expression clouded. Even dinners became a pattern of untouched food: spaghetti, salads, homemade cookies. Nothing helped. "Emma, are you feeling sick?" Rachel knelt to her level, but Emma shook her head, whispering, "Sorry, Mama, I'm not hungry." The word Mama softened Rachel's heart, yet the child's fear made her chest tighten. Daycare staff reported Emma barely touched lunch as well. When Rachel expressed her concern, Michael dismissed it, insisting she worried too much. One night, when Emma asked for water, her hands trembled as she accepted the glass, but Michael didn't seem to notice. Desperate, Rachel took her to a pediatrician. The doctor found no physical abnormalities, slight underweight, but nothing critical. "Stress," she said, possibly from adjusting to a stepmother. Rachel insisted she loved Emma like her own, and the doctor comforted her, saying trust needed time. But Emma refused dinner again that night. Michael suddenly shouted at the child, startling both Emma and Rachel. Afterward, he asked Emma whether she disliked Rachel's cooking because it differed from his late wife's. Emma only sobbed into his chest. From then on, Rachel poured herself into cooking research: hamburgers, pizza, pasta, omelet rice, but nothing changed. Even when she tried simple rustic dishes, Emma whispered the same heartbreaking words: "Sorry, Mama, I'm not hungry." A week later, exhausted and discouraged, Rachel sought advice from coworkers, but her anxiety grew as Emma's complexion paled and her energy faded. Rachel cried alone in the kitchen night after night, uncertain what she was doing wrong. When she begged Michael to tell her what kind of food his late wife used to cook, he gave vague answers, insisting it was painful to remember. His tone gradually turned cold, even suggesting the problem was Rachel's cooking. By the time Michael left for a 3-day business trip that Friday, Rachel felt a quiet relief. Emma too looked relieved when his car disappeared. For the first time since the wedding, Emma expressed a wish of her own: "I want to go to the park." That day marked the first time Emma ate even a bite of Rachel's food, sandwiches at their picnic, and Rachel nearly cried when Emma whispered, I like Mama's sandwiches. But dinner that evening brought back Emma's trembling refusal, as if some unseen fear still controlled her. That night, everything changed when Emma appeared in the living room after bedtime, her small body shaking. Mama, I can only talk when Daddy isn't watching. Rachel felt her heart stop as Emma continued, voice trembling. The previous Mama also stopped eating food, and Daddy started mixing white powder into her food. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face as Emma's trembling voice continued, each word slicing through the quiet living room like a blade. Emma clutched her pajamas, eyes brimming with terror, as she whispered that her father used to get angry at the previous Mama for not eating, and that afterward he began mixing white powder into her food, calling it medicine. Rachel's breath caught as Emma described how her former mother gradually refused food, became unusually sleepy, and then eventually died. A cold realization overcame Rachel. Michael's first wife had not died from illness at all. Emma, Rachel managed to ask, voice quivering, you're scared to eat my cooking because you're afraid your daddy might poison me too. Emma nodded violently, tears rolling down her cheeks, and clung to Rachel. I don't want the new Mama to die. I wanted to protect you, so I didn't eat anything Daddy might mix. Rachel wrapped her arms around Emma, rocked the sobbing girl, and felt her entire world shift. Emma hadn't been rejecting her. She had been desperately protecting her stepmother, a burden no child should bear. You're safe, Rachel whispered, her own tears falling. I'll protect you now. But Emma trembled again. If Daddy knows I told, he'll get angry, he screamed at the previous Mama every day. Every detail Emma shared connected perfectly with the uneasiness Rachel had felt for months. Michael's sudden bursts of anger, his refusal to discuss his late wife, Emma's terror around meals, and the way she blossomed only when he was gone. You did the right thing telling me, Rachel assured her. You're such a brave girl. With her hands shaking, Rachel picked up the phone. Who are you calling? Emma asked, fear creeping into her voice. The police, Rachel replied firmly. We have to tell them everything before Daddy comes back. A faint light of hope flickered in Emma's eyes. Really? You believe me? Of course, Rachel whispered, hugging her again. You saved me. 40 minutes later, 2 detectives arrived, Detective Johnson, an older man with calm eyes, and Detective Rodriguez, a young woman with a gentle voice. Rachel held Emma tightly as she explained what had happened, her voice trembling but determined. Detective Rodriguez knelt to Emma's eye level and asked quietly, Emma, sweetheart, can you tell us what you saw? Encouraged by Rachel's presence, Emma nodded nervously and described the white powder, the tiny bags from Michael's study drawer, and how the previous Mama became sleepy and weak each day. The detectives exchanged grim looks. When asked if she could show them the study, Emma explained it was in the back room on the 2nd floor, and that her father always locked it, but he might have forgotten this time because he left in a hurry for the business trip. Detective Johnson radioed headquarters immediately. Rush the search warrant application. We may have a homicide. Early the next morning, a police search team arrived. Rachel and Emma were advised to relocate temporarily for safety, but Rachel refused to leave until she knew the truth. They settled at a nearby hotel to wait. At 10 a.m., Detective Johnson called and asked to speak in person. When he arrived, his expression was grave. Mrs. Harrison, Emma's testimony appears accurate, he said. Large quantities of prescription drugs were found in Michael Harrison's study. Rachel felt a chill crawl down her spine. What kind of drugs? Powerful sleeping pills and tranquilizers, Detective Rodriguez answered. Amounts far beyond legal prescriptions. He likely obtained them illegally through pharmaceutical connections. The detectives then explained something far more devastating. Jennifer Harrison's diary had been discovered in a hidden safe. Michael's previous wife finally had a name. Copies of several diary entries were shown to Rachel. In them, Jennifer wrote about Michael preparing more of her meals and how she became strangely drowsy afterward, unable to move, frightened by her own body shutting down. One entry read that Emma seemed to know something was wrong and watched her with worried eyes. Another ended with a plea, if something happens to me, please protect Emma. Rachel broke down in tears. Jennifer had known. She had feared the same fate Emma now tried desperately to prevent for Rachel. The detectives continued. Michael had increased Jennifer's life insurance shortly before their marriage and had taken out a similarly large policy on Rachel right after their wedding. The implication was horrifying. She had been next. If Emma hadn't told you, Detective Rodriguez said softly. You might have met the same fate. Then came the question, Emma whispered shakily. Are you going to catch Daddy? Yes, Detective Johnson assured her. He will be arrested for murder when he returns from his trip. Just then Rachel's phone rang. Michael. The detectives instructed her to answer normally. Hello, Michael, she said, forcing calm. How is Emma? Is she eating? He asked in his usual cold tone. Same as before, Rachel lied. She's still not eating much. I'll be back tomorrow night, he replied. Fix it by then. When the call ended, Detective Johnson nodded. He doesn't suspect a thing. They prepared for the arrest at the airport. That night, local news flashed with the headline, Pharmaceutical Sales Manager Arrested on Suspicion of Wife's Murder. Emma watched silently, her small fingers gripping Rachel's hand. I was scared of Daddy, Emma whispered, but he was still family. You did nothing wrong, Rachel said, pulling her close. You saved both of us. Rachel hugged Emma tightly as the news report continued describing Michael Harrison's arrest. The flashing headline, reflecting faintly in the hotel window, while Emma stared at the screen with a conflicted expression. When I remember the previous mama, Emma murmured, eyes glistening, I think Daddy is a bad person. Rachel stroked her hair gently, whispering, You were so brave. You told the truth even when you were scared. The previous mama would be proud of you. Emma hesitated, her voice trembling as she asked, Does the new mama hate Emma now? Rachel shook her head firmly, cupping the girl's cheeks. Never. You saved my life. I love you from the bottom of my heart, and I want to be with you forever. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emma gave a genuine smile, small and fragile, but filled with warmth. Really? Really, we're a real family? A real family, Rachel promised, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. That night, Emma slept deeply, free from the terror that had haunted her tiny shoulders for far too long, and Rachel lay awake, listening to the quiet breathing of the child who had saved her. Days passed as the investigation progressed quickly, the trial preparations beginning almost immediately due to the overwhelming evidence gathered from Michael's study, Jennifer's diary, and Emma's testimony. The community buzzed with shock as more details emerged: the illegal acquisition of prescription drugs, the insurance policies, and the carefully orchestrated lies Michael had woven for years. Throughout the legal process, Rachel stayed by Emma's side, supporting her through interviews and preparations for testifying. Michael continued to deny all charges, maintaining that his wife died from illness and that Emma was confused, but the weight of the evidence grew heavier with each passing day. When the trial finally began, the courtroom was filled with reporters, attorneys, and spectators drawn by the chilling case. Rachel sat in the gallery, holding Emma's small hand as tightly as she could without hurting her. Emma was nervous, her legs too short to reach the floor as she sat at the witness stand, but when asked to speak, she found courage, recalling Rachel's words from the hotel room. You were brave before. You can be brave again. With a trembling voice, Emma told the court how she had seen her father angry at the previous mama for not eating, how he mixed the white powder into her food, and how her mother became sleepier and weaker until she could no longer stand. The courtroom remained silent as she spoke, many adults visibly shaken that such a horrifying truth had been seen through the eyes of a small child. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to imply Emma had misinterpreted what she saw, but the prosecution had Jennifer's diary excerpts, medical confirmations, the seized drugs, and the insurance paperwork to reinforce every word she testified. Rachel watched as Emma bravely held her ground, answering every question honestly even when her voice faltered. When she returned to her seat beside Rachel, she whispered, Is it over now? And Rachel squeezed her hand gently, whispering back, Almost, sweetheart. When the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom felt heavy with anticipation. We, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Harrison, guilty of first-degree murder. Emma exhaled a shaky breath, and Rachel wrapped an arm around her shoulders. It's over now, Rachel whispered softly. You don't have to be afraid anymore. During the months of legal proceedings, Rachel worked tirelessly through the process of becoming Emma's legal guardian. Michael's parents had already passed away, and Jennifer's parents were elderly and unable to care for Emma. Most importantly, Emma herself insisted, again and again, that she wanted to stay with Rachel. I want to be with Rachel, Mama, she repeated whenever a family court investigator asked. 6 months later, the formal adoption was finalized, and Rachel and Emma stood together in the courthouse hallway, holding the official documents that declared them mother and daughter. Afterward, They celebrated quietly at home, making a simple meal together, their first truly joyful one since the nightmare began. Rachel asked gently, "What would you like to make?" And Emma, after thinking carefully, answered, "I want to eat the real hamburgers the previous mama made for me, the delicious ones she made before Daddy came." The request warmed Rachel's heart, a sign that Emma was recovering, not erasing her mother but reclaiming the happy memories she once had. They made the hamburgers together, the shapes uneven and vegetables chopped imperfectly. But when Emma took her first big bite, her face brightened with pure joy. "It's delicious," she declared, her eyes sparkling. "Rachel Mama's hamburgers are the most delicious in the world." Rachel nearly cried. After months of hearing "Sorry, Mama," to now hear laughter and happiness was overwhelming. "Your stomach doesn't hurt anymore?" Rachel asked gently. "No," Emma said, shaking her head with confidence. "Because Rachel Mama doesn't put bad things in food. Rachel Mama is kind." That night, as Rachel tucked her into bed, Emma mumbled sleepily, "Thank you for protecting me." Rachel kissed her forehead. "You protected me too. We protected each other." In the years that followed, Emma flourished. By the time she turned 8, she was energetic, cheerful, had many friends, and loved school. Mealtimes became her favorite part of the day, and cooking together became a weekend tradition. Sometimes Emma looked up at the sky and said, "I think the previous mama is happy too." And Rachel believed she was right. Jennifer would be glad knowing her daughter was safe, loved, and smiling again. Emma often repeated her favorite sentence, "Rachel Mama's food is delicious because it's full of love." And in those simple words lived the truth of their new family, a family bound not by blood, but by trust, healing, and the love they chose to give each other.